America's most racist team, the Washington Redskins. Thank God they fired Bruce Allen. Jay Gruden also wasn't the best coach for them. I think giving player control and personnel control to Ron Rivera, the former Panthers head coach, is really good. Yes, he had a really bad last year with the Panthers, but he did build a Super Bowl team, and he did build a almost perennial playoff contender for at least a pretty solid stretch. I think from 2014 to 2017, the team was pretty good. Now, when you look at their roster as a whole, Dwayne Haskins did improve all throughout his rookie year. He had less turnovers and more yards, and all his stats and everything went up. I think one thing that is worrisome, that it's a new playbook and it's a post-corona world where we don't have any training camp for him, so that is worrying to see if he will actually improve. His accuracy and his footwork weren't the best. His release did get faster throughout the season, though, and like I said, less turnovers, and he improved. So I'd say overall, that position is trending up. Also, when you look at who they brought in Kyle Allen, who worked in with Ron Rivera last offseason and last year. He's a solid backup for that team, and I like what you have there in him, where he can potentially go out there and win a couple of games for you. Alex Smith will most likely never play football again, and I'm not going to really tally him when I come to weighing the quarterback position as a whole. But overall, what he's doing, just a quick tangent on him, is he's never done something before, and you can't really put a percentage on what he's trying to accomplish. And if he does accomplish it, it's going to be a miracle. I personally think he should retire. He's already almost like 38 anyway. But it's a really underrated storyline, and I hope he does succeed in whatever he's trying to do. Overall, my verdict for the quarterback position is it's going to improve most likely. I think Dwayne Haskins will improve in his second year, even if slightly, and they have a pretty solid backup in Kyle Allen. Now, when you look at the running back, it's sort of a mess almost. Chris Thompson was released after not really being able to stay healthy for multiple seasons in a row. And they have Adrian Peterson still, who's 35 years old, and he's almost entering Frank Gore territory, where he's putting up pretty solid and stable numbers. And it's kind of impressive that he's just sort of grinding away at it. And he's going up in the stat book every single year. Shout out to Adrian Peterson for being a monster. Now, when you look at Darius Geis, he was pretty solid whenever he did play, but he only played 5 games, and he's going into his third year. Honestly, there isn't much to look forward to in Darius Geis, but other than the potential, if you can stay healthy, you have something there, but the fact is he hasn't been able to stay healthy. They brought in Peyton Barber in free agency, and he's more of a solid backup guy, and they're going to add a lot of competition, I think, in the running back room. They drafted Bryce Love with a 4th-round pick, and I don't know if you remember, but if he hadn't stayed in for his senior year, he probably would have been almost a 1st-round or 2nd-round pick back in the 2018 draft. He's an extremely explosive back. He was injured. He did tear his ACL, and if he hadn't gotten hurt, he probably would have been a much better player for them. He's going to be on passing downs more likely, and will probably help replace Chris Thompson. And they also got J.D. McKissick from the Lions. He's a solid receiver again, and he and Love could hopefully replace what they had in Chris Thompson. Overall, this is going to be a pretty heavy rotation, I feel like, with Adrian Peterson and Darius Geis being the 2 main backs. And if injury pushes people in, I think they could potentially have some solid enough depth where it's not a huge issue. When you look at wide receiver, they had standout Terry McLaurin, who went off for 58 yards, 58 catches and 919 yards and 7 touchdowns. He was low-key one of the better rookie wide receivers, if not the best rookie wide receiver in his rookie year. Kelvin Harmon was also another rookie they drafted. He is a good size and a pretty good jump ball guy, and I think he is poised to improve. Paul Richardson was cut after being a bust, essentially after they signed him from the Seattle Seahawks a couple off seasons back. Steven Sims was a late season stud for them, and he will most likely not be an elite player, but he could be a pretty reliable guy for them. And Trey Quinn was another guy who was not really special, but again, it's more depth. Overall, this wide receiver group has some potential with Terry McLaurin. I think he can be a true wide receiver 1. Outside of that, you have some okay guys, but you don't really have a solid wide receiver 2, with Kelvin Harmon probably being the closest thing to that. I think you could probably go for more depth. They did draft Antonio Gandy-Golden, I believe. He was another sort of jump ball guy and more of a physical wide receiver. You're probably getting a really good guy in him. They also drafted Antonio Gibson, who I really like. He was a very versatile running back wide receiver sort of hybrid almost, and everything he did in college was pretty explosive. I liked what I saw from him, and he could come in there and add some explosiveness to a wide receiving core that lacks it outside of Terry McLaurin. Now, when you look at the tight end group, this group is very underwhelming. Vernon Davis ended up retiring, and he has maybe Hall of Fame potential. Probably not, but he's going to be close. Jordan Reed also was cut after injuries. And outside of that, you have Richard Rodgers, who he signed, and Logan Thomas, both who are low risk, but also don't have much upside in their careers. Jeremy Sprinkle was another guy who went off for 26 catches, 241 yards, and 1 touchdown. But overall, this tight end position is the worst position group in the NFC East, and there's not much to look forward to here. Offensive line, Trent Williams did end up getting traded to the San Francisco 49ers, and Brandon Scherff was franchise tag, which is a surprise. Many thought that he would end up getting released. Brandon Scherff was definitely the best offensive lineman on that team right now. On a slightly more negative note, they ended up releasing Eric Flowers, or letting him test free agency, where he ended up signing with the Miami Dolphins. Eric Flowers is a really good offensive guard, and he's the story of a guy who was probably playing the wrong position with the New York Giants. And granted, he was a bust for the New York Giants, but Eric Flowers was a potential key building block almost for that offensive line, and he brings some stability that they no longer have. When you look at the starting offensive line for the Washington Redskins, it's not really that great. They did bring in Cornelius Lucas and Wes Schweitzer in free agency. Wes Schweitzer will most likely end up starting at one of the guard spots, most likely at right guard or left guard. Cornelius Lucas was more of a depth signing from the Bears, who has started games, and he has experience at both right tackle and left tackle. But overall, you have Morgan Moses, who's a solid guy. Brandon Scherff was really good. Chase Rollier, who's a solid guy. He has 37 games who started. Wes Schweitzer is an okay guy, an okay depth guy, and he'll probably end up starting. And Cornelius Lucas might end up starting at right tackle, but I'm not really sure. According to OurLads.com, he is actually starting at left tackle for them. And overall, this offensive line is lacking some of that depth as well and high-end talent that you'd like to see. They drafted Sadiq Charles in this draft. He's another guy who could end up being some nice depth for them. Wes Martin is another notable guy. But other than that, the depth on the offensive line is questionable. This offensive line has been getting consistently injured over the last few years, and that is worrisome. So hopefully they don't get injured, but if they do, the offensive line could very much be in trouble, and that could very much hurt the production of Dwayne Haskins. Now, when you look at the defensive line, the way that this defensive line is being built and the way Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera are building is very interesting. It's almost like a San Francisco light sort of situation where they have a ton of first-round picks there. They have Jonathan Allen, Montez Sweat, Daron Payne, all of them first-rounders. Ryan Kerrigan's an older first-rounder as well, but you have Chase Young, who they just drafted, who, according to Brett Coleman, is the best pass rusher he's ever scouted. I'm going to take his word for it because he's pretty good at his job. But overall, they have a ton of first-round picks who they can rotate in and out. They have Matt Ioannidis as well, Nate Orchard, who is another rotational guy. And overall, when you're looking at the linebacker position as a whole, or the defensive line position as a whole, it's a ton of guys who have really high ceilings, and they have yet to reach those ceilings. And if they do, this could be the best defensive line in the NFC East, and maybe even compete with the San Francisco 49ers for the best line in the NFC, maybe even the NFL if everything pans out well. Now, when you look at the linebacker position, Thomas Davis was signed, and honestly, he's probably going to play more of a coaching role, I'd hope. If he does end up starting, which is what OurLads.com says he'll most likely start starting at linebacker, middle linebacker specifically, according to them. That's worrisome. He is 37 years old, and he has declined. But behind him, they have John Bostic, who's another guy who has put up pretty solid numbers, and he can come in and play the role if needed. Cole Holcomb and Sean Dean Hamilton are both notable guys, as mentioning here. They're good depth guys who can come in and play solid football if needed. And Reuben Foster is the wild card here. He had really high-end talent and obviously had some off-field issues. If he can put it together, he could end up being a star for this linebacking front. Overall, I like what this linebacking group has to offer, and the depth here is something that other teams might want to look forward to and look to mimicking. Overall, the linebacking position is not a hole for this team, and I like what they have done here. When you look at the cornerback position, Kendall Fuller, he actually ended up coming back, and for me that's remarkable that a team is coming back, players coming back, especially for a team like the Washington Redskins, which has been known to not really attract high-end free agency talent. He came and back, and he obviously liked his time in Washington, and he wants to play for Ron Rivera. And he's another guy who can play safety and outside corner. The Washington Redskins defense was 18th in passing yards allowed and 27th in yards allowed per game and 27th in points per game allowed with 27.2. So hopefully Kendall Fuller can come back and hopefully staple some of the passing yards. Ronald Darby is another guy who gets deep a lot, and he has good speed, but he doesn't really have the physicality you want. He was signed in a one-year deal from the division rival of the Philadelphia Eagles. I honestly don't know what to think about this because Ronald Darby is not someone I really like that much, but he also, when he puts it together, can be one of the better, more solid and reliable corners for a team. They lost Josh Norman and Quinton Dunbar, who were both their cornerback 1 and cornerback 2, and they're hoping that Kendall Fuller and Ronald Darby and even Fabio Monroe can come in and fill in the void left by those guys. When you look at safety, Landon Collins is one of the big money guys, and he led the team in tackles, which is not good. Even if he does play strong safety, you never want to see your safeties leading the team in tackles, similar to the Cincinnati Bengals, where their linebacking position was completely decimated with injuries and just poor talent. You want to see more of the linebackers doing that, and the fact that they aren't is worrisome. Sean Davis is another guy that they brought in from Pittsburgh, as well as Deshazier Everett. Both those guys can end up playing the free safety position at a pretty high level if needed. Honestly, both those moves are moves that I really like. Overall, the defensive backfield, they have some solid players, but there's a lot of question marks as well. I don't know what to think here. I think it's probably one of the weaker groups in the NFC East as a whole. Now, overall, the Washington Redskins for me are clearly the worst team in the division. They have the worst quarterback. They have really sus depth of the offensive line. Their defensive line has potential to be the best in the league, which gives them hope. But other than that, it's a lot of question marks for them. I do like what Ron Rivera is doing, and he is a good coach. And he will hopefully bring back some of the glory days for the Washington Redskins. But overall, they have the worst talent in the NFC East, in my opinion. And peace out. Bye.